If XRP explodes in value, many of you will wake up with life-changing wealth. But most people who will come into sudden money lose it very quickly. Most lottery winners, they go broke within 3 to 5 years. And you might think, how does that happen, right? Like, how does somebody come into that much money and then go bankrupt within 3 to 5 years? Well, that's what we're going to talk about in this video. And we're going to give you the 10 moves based on timeless principles in Think and Grow Rich, and how that can help you stay rich and stay wealthy on the other side of your liquidity event in XRP. So number one, right out the gate, most people are not going to do this, but I'm going to tell you, if you really want to maintain your wealth over the long term, whether you sell it or you hold the asset itself, what you're going to do is do nothing for the first 90 days or 120 days. For the first 3 to 4 months, you're just going to get used to having that much wealth. And yeah, I know that's going to sound counterintuitive to almost everything else you're going to hear out there, but most of the largest mistakes that people make are in the first couple weeks, right? And I'm not saying sit on your hands and don't structure your estate or get the right people in your corner or don't set up things to make sure the use of the funds is going to be successful. I'm just saying don't spend the money. Sit on the money for the first 90 to 120 days. Maybe even longer than that. Some people recommend 6 months or longer, just so that you feel wealthy. You understand that it's not going to go anywhere, that you don't need to spend it immediately. Most people live in this paradigm that as soon as they get money, they spend it. If you can break that habit, if you have been living paycheck to paycheck, that can make a big difference in the long run in your ability to preserve the wealth. So during that period of time, I'd really focus on your education, making sure that you understand the difference between assets and liabilities, looking at how family offices like the Rockefellers have built their multi-generational wealth and set themselves up for success, and their family for multiple generations to be able to leave a legacy and not be the same position as the Vanderbilts that lost it in 3 generations. You're going to look up insurance policies. You definitely want to understand that. You want to understand infinite banking, and you want to start learning all of the ways that you can mitigate taxes, because that is going to be absolutely your largest expense, whether you like it or not. If you're generating income off of these assets, if you're liquidating them to take profits, whatever it is, estate taxes, as these assets move from your estate to your descendants when you pass away, there's all of these things and considerations that you're going to have. More money, more problems. It's what they say. And I wouldn't say that that's necessarily the full truth. Obviously, money solves money problems, but it can cause other problems if you don't know what you're doing and you don't educate yourself on these things in the first, again, 3-4 months before you really get into investing the capital or spending the money on these additional things that we're going to talk about. So during that period, you can do this as well. This is what we work with our clients on at Digital Ascension Group. We're a multifamily office. We specialize in liquidity events and digital assets. So people make a bunch of money in crypto, 20, 50, $100 million. We're here. We're able to provide all the professional services that you're going to need, but we always start with this, and that is designing a purpose-driven life. And you're going to put together a family constitution or compass, mission statement, core values, principles that you and your family are going to abide by. Things that you want to leave as your legacy, the impact that you want to have in your community or for helping society as a whole, curing diseases. There's a lot of reasons that people that come into wealth want to give back and use that money with a purpose of some kind. Some people want to continue to invest in startups and start a VC. Some people want to start a foundation. Some people want to build a rocket and go to Mars like Elon Musk. There's a lot of things that people might want to do for a lot of different reasons. Most of the time, it's because of things in their life that have happened to them. Something has had an impact on them that's caused them to not want that to happen to other people. Most of the time, it's some suffering that they experienced that they want to alleviate for whoever comes behind them. You see this with vaccines and polio and a lot of the other things that people have spent money toward. Prostate cancer is another one that I can think of from the 80s. There was a gentleman that was very prevalent back then, and he used the majority of his family office money to not cure prostate cancer, but really eliminate or bring down the fatality rate for that in particular. So you're not here to just be rich, okay? You want this to be meaningful. You want to get clear on your mission, your long-term vision, and the impact that you want this wealth to have on your family, your community, and the future that you want to build for those around you. And the reason you set this up first is because if you don't understand whether you're trying to maximize your legacy, your lifestyle, or your giving, then you're not going to know where to go next. Most often, we work with people to set up an LLC to begin with because it gives you the most flexibility and freedom and the most benefits in the short term to be able to mitigate taxes and set yourself up for success. Provide some anonymity if it's filed in Wyoming or South Dakota or some of the other jurisdictions that we look at pretty frequently. And then, you might have a living trust that sits on the cap table there that manages those assets. And there's a bunch of ways to structure your estate, but it all is going to depend on where you want to go from there. Right. So again, if it's legacy, you're probably going to build out multiple trusts. You're going to set things up. They're going to protect those assets over the long term, to be able to generate income, and then be able to continue to build off of that for your family wealth. If it's for lifestyle, you probably don't need all those things, right? Maybe you don't have any children. Maybe you're just going to leave it all to charity when you pass away, but you're going to try to spend that last dollar on their way out the door. We have a few people that are like that, and more power to them, right? And there's definitely a way that you want to structure things if that's how you want to go. And then if giving is your largest prerogative, it is where you want to set things up. Obviously, you're going to probably want to set up a private foundation or a public charity, maybe a charitable remainder trust, maybe a donor advised fund. There's a lot of different vehicles that you could set up. They're going to be more relevant for giving versus some of the other things we just discussed. So once you have that family charter, that compass, that mission statement that you're going to follow, then we're going to start building out the team. And you're going to need a brain trust. This means a fiduciary, wealth manager, tax strategist, tax attorney, estate planner, somebody that's a CPA to help mitigate taxes, somebody that's on the accounting side. And you're going to want the experts. You're going to want people that have been there, done this before with digital assets, not specific to other asset classes. Maybe they have a bunch of real estate experience or traditional stock portfolio or bonds or treasuries. Those people are brilliant, don't get me wrong, but if they haven't dealt with crypto before and you have your liquidity event in crypto, they're not going to know how to help you. So make sure you're seeking out professionals that have the experience in this area. And again, not to promote ourselves, but Digital Ascension Group, that is exactly what we're built for. And they're going to help you. They're going to make sure that you're making the best decisions that are aligned with those long-term goals. And again, you want to pull all of those resources together and all those professionals and have this discussion about what those long-term goals are, what that mission statement is, and then align across them because they all have their own prerogative on what they want to sell you and what they're able to provide. And they're probably going to have some different ideas on how to structure this. But that's, again, why you're probably going to want to partner with a multifamily office that can kind of quarterback everything for you. We sit on the side of the table for the client and make sure that their interests stay top of mind and ahead of everything else. And the professionals are put in check. Obviously, all these things are tools and they're at your disposal, but you don't want the rug pulled over your eyes or the wool pulled over your eyes and you to set something up in a way that inhibits you later on or somebody take advantage of you now that you've come into money. So once you've aligned yourself with those professionals, then you're going to start establishing your estate. So again, this could be trusts or asset protection trusts, which is what we primarily use in Wyoming. If somebody's primary goal is legacy, that's going to be one of the first things we set up. And you're going to get calls, right? You're going to get calls from a bunch of people asking you for money. Friends, family, old acquaintances, people that you've told about XRP that didn't buy any. And this is where you're going to set up that family board and your financial committee. Again, you might take some of those professionals that you just met with or you've decided to work with at the previous step and move them onto your family board or your financial committee. You're probably going to want a CIO or somebody that's going to manage doing due diligence on all of the things that you're going to invest in. You're probably going to decide which verticals you're going to continue to invest in heavily versus diversifying completely out of digital assets, since that's your domain expertise and that's where you made your money. Probably going to stay, I don't want to say siloed in that vertical, but a large portion of your wealth is probably going to continue to be invested there because that's the asset class that you understand if you made your money in it. So you're going to want to work with professionals that are, again, proficient with digital assets, but do have experience in other asset classes. And depending on the amount of wealth that you come into, you should be able to afford to work with people that have 20, 30, 40 years experience in those other verticals, right? You're going to be, again, looking for domain expertise across the different verticals that you want to get into. So maybe that's, commercial real estate or multifamily real estate. Maybe you want to get into M&A transactions. You want to buy boring businesses. You're going to be looking at assets, right? So we talked about this in the beginning. If you're going to not spend the money for the first 3 to 6 months, like we talked about, you're going to be looking at acquiring assets, buying those assets that can then fund the fun stuff in your life. So even if if lifestyle is your game, okay, and you don't want to maximize lifestyle if you've come into a bunch of money, you still want to acquire assets that are going to cash flow and appreciate in value that you can draw leverage against to be able to fund your lifestyle. And the digital assets that you have invested in could be XRP, could be XLM, could be XDC, could be some of these other ones. We think XRP is going to be probably the highest ROI in the short term. And that's why we built out ways to be able to generate returns on XRP and be able to borrow against it and hold it in institutional custody with Digital Wealth Partners, which is our wealth management firm. It's an SEC registered RIA, over 500 clients, close to 250 million under management today, all in XRP. So if you are over $500,000 invested in digital assets or at current value of digital assets, please reach out, digitalwealthpartners.net. And you go to the contact us form there. Our team there can work with you to make sure that you get things set up the right way. So you're going to designate your board. The financial committee could be some people, your advisor from Digital Wealth Partners, or it could be additional people that are in your network that have domain expertise about whatever investments you're going to be making. Obviously, you're probably going to be on the family board. And the way that you're going to mitigate any animosity that's going to come from these other people that ask you for some money is you're going to say, absolutely, we would love to loan you the money or to invest in whatever you have. Please put together a pro forma, send us the deck, send us the terms of the deal, and I'll make sure that, we review that at our next meeting with our board and financial committee. As long as it meets the criteria that we're looking to invest in or loan to, meets the provisions that we have set forth for the ways that we're going to do structured debt or credit, then, we'd absolutely love to give you the money. Most of the time at that point, they're probably not going to come back with anything. But if they do, then you have a system and a process, and it might be really good. You might make that investment. You might make that loan. But if they really aren't prepared and they're just looking for a quick handout, you're going to know that pretty quickly. And then you have a system and a process to be able to mitigate the potential animosity that they're going to feel toward you if you just flat out told them no, right? So you need systems and processes in place. You want to make sure that you have standards for the way that you operate, and putting these things in place fairly quickly after price appreciation in your liquidity event is absolutely necessity. So in doing this, your structure removes any emotion, and it's going to make sure that your legacy is maintained and it isn't drained by, again, people just coming out of the woodwork asking for money. So once you have that team, you're going to absolutely want to hold these digital assets if you continue to hold on to them inside of institutional custody. Some people are just going to exit, and we can talk about that a little bit. You're going to want to do that OTC or with somebody that does lower costs on those transactions. Caleb and Brown has very high fees. You've got, other people like Kraken. They've got an OTC desk. Uphold has an OTC desk. Happy to make introductions there. But if you're working with Digital Wealth Partners, it's only 12 basis points is all you're going to get charged. So very, very low cost if you are looking to liquidate a portion of your investments and cash out. Again, you're going to have to be, aware of the tax implications that go along with that. And we will make sure that you're set up and you have the best advisors around you to mitigate those tax implications and use those funds in the best way possible to reach your goals and mission. But if you are going to hold the majority of your wealth in digital assets, you do have a very low basis and you don't necessarily want to cash out, you're probably going to want to get those into institutional custody. Most people, if you're holding $500,000, $1 million, $2 million, $5 million, $20 million, $50 million on a ledger or a cold storage device with no insurance and just some keys on some paper, gets a little sketchy. And so you're going to want multi-sig, you're going to want institutional grade custody, you're going to want insurance, you're going to want all the things that come along with institutional grade custody with Digital Wealth Partners. And that's why I hold my assets there. And that's why we've seen the demand that we've seen over the past 6 months here as that much money is moved into institutional custody, because people want to make sure that their beneficiaries are taken care of. They want to make sure that their wife's a signer. They want to make sure that their assets are insured and taken care of. They have peace of mind. They can sleep at night. They're not worried about somebody breaking into their house and taking their cold wallet, which I know a couple people today that are that way. So if you do have that really low basis, again, once you have that in institutional custody, we work with Anchorage. We're working to, onboard with a few other large custodians that you might know in the near future. And you're going to want the ability to borrow against it. And so this is the infinite banking concept that I alluded to earlier. You might want to fund an insurance policy with it where it can grow tax-free. You can trade it inside that policy if you want to. The cash value of that policy continues to accrue value over time that you can borrow against. The investment banks and other partners that we have, we're looking at the ability to do that. But we do have people today that will borrow or lend you money against the XRP as collateral. The interest rates are a little bit higher today. I look at it like real estate in the 80s. Okay. Real estate was expensive to finance in the 80s, but over time, as those properties accrued value and went up, the interest rates continued to come down. And so you were able to refinance it, pull equity out, and then continue to build your portfolio of whatever you were investing in and continue to grow your legacy and your wealth. So I think that that's going to be the same thing we see for some of these digital assets. Right now, interest rates might be a little high to borrow against them, but you're able to roll that collateral and refinance that later. And as these things are implemented at scale, have a much higher market cap, and the risk comes down and the underwriting gets a little bit more, then you'll be able to refinance them at even lower interest rates than they are today and potentially even have the same or a lower payment and pull more equity out of them, especially if they've increased substantially. So that's the game that I'm going to be playing, the infinite banking, and I'll continue to just roll that. We'll take out reinsurance on the policy or my death, and then make sure that that covers the debt that I've taken out so that the assets pass to my estate and then generations after me without having to liquidate them to be able to cover that debt on the other side of my demise. So again, once you've got things set up, you might have that trust, you might have whatever else aligns with your mission statement, core values, and the principles that you've set forth to make the most impact or leave a legacy for yourself. You're going to want to set up a holding company. This could be a private trust company. This could be a C Corp. It could be an LLC, but the people or the entities that are going to sit on that are likely going to be living trusts that you are the trustee for, so that the assets and the money that flow up to that are segregating the things for taxes and then also limiting the ability to lose the assets for the way that we structure it. It's probably the next thing you're going to want to set up. So you're going to need a central hub that's going to be for the advisors that you work with. So the profits roll up to that, you pay them and you pay yourself out of it as well. But if somebody were to take control of the stock in this corporation or come after you directly, that's segregated from the assets. So they're not able to liquidate those and pay themselves back. Things are set up in a way that mitigates that risk. So this is, again, you're going to want to work with somebody that understands how to structure the estate the right way and make sure that everything is separated and gives you the scale and the succession planning that you're looking for. And at this point, now that you have some cash flow and your assets are protected and things are structured the right way, depending on what you actually have for debt, you might want to pay that off. High interest rate debt for credit cards, absolutely pay those off. Your home, it depends on what it's financed at. We've talked about this before in other areas, but I just want to touch on it again here. If you have a 3% interest rate or less on your house, basically free money. And especially if it's on a 30-year fixed mortgage, unless it just causes you a lot of stress having that debt, which absolutely could, and you would be completely justified in paying it off. Logically, it does not make sense. You would absolutely be able to put that money to work that you would be putting toward your home, put it to work somewhere else to be able to generate. Even treasuries are at 5% right now. So it really just doesn't make any logical or mathematical sense to pay off a home if your interest rates are that low on it on a 30-year fixed mortgage. But if it does bother you and it causes you stress, then it can absolutely be worth it. So just think through that practically, right? You're going to look at the interest rate or how you could put that money to work somewhere else. And then if servicing a debt with an asset, again, makes sense, then that's probably the way to do it. But if it is going to put you at ease, then it might make sense to go ahead and pay it off. So killing off consumer debt or liabilities that could drain your energy can be a good thing. But taking leverage and borrowing and debt is not a bad thing, right? It's a tool. And if it's used wisely, it's a good tool that can multiply, not destroy your wealth. So one of the other things that most people start to think about after they've come into a lot of money is anonymity and control. The wealthiest people in the world are not people that you know. They're not in the spotlight. There are a few that's required in order to accomplish their goal or mission. But for most people, they want to operate in the background. They want control of things, but they don't necessarily want a whole lot of spotlights on them. And same thing for your family, right? I won't say you become a target when you come into a lot of wealth, but you kind of do. There are other people that may want to take advantage of you or hurt your family or do things to be able to try to take some of that wealth from you, whether that's through lawsuit or other means, right? And so the more that you can set things up in a way that is not as public facing, the better. So again, this is part of what we look at for international jurisdictions and domestic here in the U.S. Which of those jurisdictions don't require you to disclose and have your name on stuff? You want to look for attorney-client privilege. You're going to want to look at trustee companies. You're going to want to look at nominee services. There's a lot of things that you can do and put in place to be able to mitigate that risk of your information becoming public and people knowing that you are involved with the amount of wealth that you have. So again, you want to be able to control things, but not to the detriment of losing the privacy or anonymity that you want to maintain. And then the last thing I'll say here is a lot of people talk about life-changing money. Don't know that you should necessarily do that. If you've been with your spouse for a long time and they have stuck it out with you for this period, and it might have been rough. I've seen a lot of people lose their fortunes over nasty lawsuits and divorces. I'm not saying to stay in your marriage if you are miserable. I'm just saying now that you have the resources, it might be easier to solve some of those money problems that may have been causing those frictions. And then also, if you do need counseling, you can pay for it. And this isn't an easy subject to talk about. There's a lot of people out there that do have, especially that are in digital assets, have had a lot of friction with their loved ones, male or female. If your counterparty didn't believe in this, it might also be hard to continue to stick around after it does pan out. But I would encourage you to water that grass. Grass is greener where you water it, not on the other side. Again, it can fracture your legacy. It really can cause a lot of problems. So just think carefully about that. Your partner is going to be one of the biggest pieces of your legacy and your life. And choosing that wisely, if you are not married and you come into this wealth, prenups, something you want to look at. Again, not a fun conversation to have with your potential spouse, but definitely something that you probably want to look at putting in place. And again, you want to make sure that you're aligning yourself with the right person if you are not married yet and you've come into this. So joining the right groups, being around the right people, obviously can make a big difference for that. We have a mastermind community. It's the Beyond Broke Mastermind. You can go check it out at beyondbroke.com. We have a lot of both male and female participants in there. Most of them are a bit more mature, a little older. They understand what this asset class is and how it can impact their lives. And they are looking to leverage this asset class to be able to retire and continue to build their legacy and do a lot of the things that we just discussed in this video. So if that's something you're interested in, you want to be a part of a community of almost 2,000 people that are invested in XRP and do want to continue to do awesome things together on the other side of price appreciation, absolutely go check that out. And we would love to have you there in the group. And you're not going to get access to all the stuff that you need alone, right? Like this is a team sport at the end of the day. Robert Kiyosaki talks about all of his, he goes into business like a rugby team. He brings his attorneys and his estate planners and his CPAs and everybody, and they go to battle together. And then that's how I kind of view our community as well. You don't have the answers to everything, and everybody has different life experiences that they can bring to the table and different expertise as you're vetting deals. If you're going to get into oil or some of these new technologies with AI or lots of other things, right? You're going to want other people that have been there, done that you can lean on and have good conversations with. They can vet things for you and help you out. If you're going through a transaction and you've never done it before, whether that's with insurance or if it's for a property or a larger property, you're going to want people by your side that have been there and done that. And again, our community has almost 2,000 people in it, a lot of people that have been through many, many things in their life that are high-level professionals. So I would encourage you to go check that out if you haven't. But even if it's not our community, I would put yourself around a mastermind, right? And that's one of the principles in Think and Grow Rich. Andrew Carnegie was somebody else that was a big proponent of a mastermind. His wealth has continued to grow for his family. He did a lot of good and philanthropic things when he passed away with his money. So there you have it. 10 different things that you need to think about on the other side of price appreciation so that you can be able to set yourself up for success and make sure that you don't end up like one of these broke lottery winners. Within 3 to 5 years of making all this money, they're bankrupt and back to where they started, or even worse than when they actually came into the wealth. So if you haven't yet, go check out digitalfamilyoffice.io. You can go ahead and set up your LLC if you have more than $50,000 to $80,000 invested in digital assets and you do think those assets are going to appreciate substantially. That's kind of the first step in making sure that you are positioned and being proactive. And with that, we'll go ahead and wrap it up. Thank you for watching this. If you did find value in it, please like, subscribe, and we'll see you on the next one.